working with dates. Just like the ones you see over here. The age and the date of birth. Now I just added these variables together with the name variable to this data sheet. And this is quite relevant to keep in mind when we start to create the pivot table. Now dates in Excel have a mind of their own. And especially when it comes to working with them in a pivot table, you need to do some tricks in order to get the pivot table to really work. And in this lesson, I'll show you how you can do this and how you can get insight from your data by working with dates. Right now, we're in a table. We know that because there's a tab called Design on the top ribbon on the right. We'll create a new pivot table. You go to the Insert tab and then click on Pivot Table. And let's rename it and call it Pivot 2. Let's build a new pivot table using a column with the dates of birth. Let's have a quick look if we can find this column with the date. And as you can see, all the columns are sorted alphabetically. So let's see if we can find the date of birth. Now, something is off, because the date of birth are not there. This is something that happens often when you edit data and you don't reload your Excel file. The pivot table shows the old variables and it omits the newly added ones. And to fix this, you can go to the Analyze tab and then click Refresh All. And as you can see, the newly added columns appear in the pivot table: name, age, and date of birth. So the lesson is always refresh your pivot table after you've modified your data. As you can imagine, dates work really good as a row, because then you get a list of all kinds of dates. Take the date and drop it into the row area. What you see now is that Excel automatically recognizes it as a date and groups it in years, into quarters, and into months. This provides a nice overview, but it's also a bit confusing because we're now looking at the pivot table in a compact view. And you already know how to fix this from the previous lesson. You can change this by going to the Design tab and then click the Report layout. Right now, as I said, it's in compact form and the pivot table provides a better overview when it's in the tabular form. As you can see, it changes the looks, but it still looks suboptimal because all the fields are collapsed. We can expand them, but that still doesn't provide a clear picture. How we do this is we click the Expand field or the Collapse field button, and let's go for the Expand field. If we do this, we get a much better overview, but it's still incomplete because there's a lot of empty and open fields. And you can see there's a lot of subtotal rows in the table. We can remove them by going to Design, clicking Subtotals, and then say Do not show the subtotals. This makes everything look much clearer. Let's first retype the date of birth into the month, because we're only displaying the month in this column. As you can see, this column is already displayed as the month in the pivot table. The date of birth name was just a copy of the original column name, and it now represents the actual month name, just like it is as a field in the pivot table. Now let's say we don't want this overview divided by the quarters like it is now. Let's say we want to just see the months. We can easily display this by removing the quarter, and as soon as we do this, we see the full list of all the months. Now the total table is quite long and therefore hard to read. For each year, every single month is listed. What we can also do is drag the months to the columns. This is not necessarily very useful, but the overview becomes cleaner. So how do we know how many people are born in which month? Because this is quite an empty table, the easiest way to fix this is to drag the employee number to the values. And that provides a good overview. Big question is, how do we visualize this? The wrong way to visualize this, and I am going to show it to you anyway, would be to select the total values of the table and then plot a bar chart on this information. This will result in a very complicated chart with a line for every single month. That doesn't really give a good overview of how old your population really is or when your population was born. What we can do instead is to remove the month value from the table altogether, and that means that we're removing both the month and the quarter from the date notation. And that's no problem because we're talking about basically the age of employees, so we're talking about their birth year. The monthly and the quarterly information is too detailed. We're better off just working with years. And when I do this, as you can see, the overview becomes much clearer. As you can see, there's quite an even distribution in terms of birth year. There's not an excess of older people versus younger people or the other way around. It's quite an average build-up for an organization. Let's rename the title of the table to the average age of employees. Now the dashboard I'll make is not really the most tangible and action-oriented dashboard. That's something that we'll do when we start to work with Power BI. I just want you to be really familiar with all the functions that Excel has to offer. What I do is create a new dashboard by right-clicking the bottom ribbon and clicking Insert and selecting a new worksheet. Let's call this one the Age Analysis. If we go back to Pivot Table 2, we can easily add a number of slices. We'll both add slices and you can also add a timeline. That's something that I won't display in this lesson, but that's something I encourage you to play around with yourself. What we'll do is we go for the slicer and we'll go for gender, education, age, years and department. We then press OK. As you can see, here are all the slices. I select them all by holding the Control key. And after selecting all of them, I press Ctrl X. This cuts all the elements, all the slices, so I can then paste them in the next worksheet. And I paste them by pressing Ctrl V. Now the next part I will fast forward. I'll quickly order the visual elements and, once again by using the Alt key, we can snap the different elements into the Excel grid. I'll make the slices the right length and reduce the column width so I can work on a more granular grid. This enables me to customize the dashboard even further. Interestingly, when I scroll down the year slicer, you see two values that don't fit. They are values below 1955 and above December 2000. These can, on the one hand, be indicators of messy and unclean data, so whenever you see this, check whether you're using the right data. Check if there's no data errors in your data, because that might confuse people when they look at your dashboard. Now, if you're sure this is not a problem, you can easily remove them by right-clicking the values in the slices and by selecting the slicer settings. And you can find the slicer settings all the way at the bottom of the menu. Here you can hide the items with no date by unchecking the bottom three boxes and checking the top one, and then press OK to confirm. As you can see, the values just disappeared. The year slicer is quite a long list. As you remember from the last time, you can create multiple rows. To do this, you go to the Option tab, and currently there's only one column, and let's now make it 5. This reduces all the boxes to unreadable gibberish. Let's make them wider, and again we hold the Alt key while doing it, and as you can see now, it provides a much better and cleaner overview. I'll now fast forward to a point where everything is mapped out in a visually appealing way. You already know how to put colors on different slices, so that's something that I will apply very quickly. The coloring for the slices works similar as how you paint charts. To paint a chart, you can select the chart and then click Design. And over there you can find different layouts that you can easily try, and we'll go for the one in black. This is an example dashboard of what people call slice and dice. Slice and dice is the idea that you can make different data selections which interact with each other. This is something some organizations are really striving for. Basic insights in your data can already be very valuable. However, oftentimes data is not as simple as it is in this worksheet. Here, all your data is already consolidated in one sheet. Oftentimes you have data coming from multiple systems, and that's where the real challenge is. However, how does this work with transactional data? Because most HR systems are transactional systems. Transactional data is data that's related to an actual date, a transaction date. So when on June 11th Bill gets a fever and he's back on his feet again on June the 18th. In this example, a transactional system has two entries, June 11th, Bill is 100% absent, and June 18th, Bill is 0% absent, he is 100% fit and present and working. Good luck and have fun!